One thing that's sort of interesting is that the Biennale itself, in a sense, is a piece of public art. You know, people are presenting things. I mean, there's a gallery kind of context within the pavilions, but the pavilions themselves have a kind of public presence. And I think what Sarah did with her pavilion is so interesting because she both has the kind of gallery experience inside the pavilion, and then also she turns it into a piece of public art as you go outside of it. And there's such an interesting transition between, you know, you come to the pavilion, you see the external aspect of it, which is quite public and kind of a communal expression. Then you go through and you have this very private experience. And then the final gallery, where she's opened up, she's taken off a wall, and you can see into the patio and into what the public piece is. So then you've got this sort of merging of those two spheres, the gallery sphere and the public sphere. And then, you know, and that sort of, you know, creates this interesting kind of parallel between what is the gallery experience and what is the public experience.
There is a very famous story about John Ahern and Rigoberto Torres making public art and placing it as a commission project, which are these two statuary-like gold, you know, casts of guys with hoods, you know, hoodies, and pit bulls. And that was placed in front of a police station as a percent for art project that was going to be permanent. And one thing that does not work well in many communities is if you just place something overnight and it goes there and nobody knows anything about it, and the next day, within 5 seconds, and we've learned this from David Hammons with the Jesse Jackson portrait, which is quite a famous case, but also this particular work was ruined, you know, immediately, but also the dialogue that not only the police department who had these sculptures in front of them hate it, but also the local community hated it because they didn't know anything about it. It was just plopped there. And what we try to do is avoid something called plop art, which is just placed and then hope and pray that it exists the next day.
You know, because the basic question of the museum is what it means to be a citizen, really. I mean, what kinds of experiences and judgments one needs to have access to or to be able to make in order to participate effectively in a society. I mean, at least that's like an older conception, which is maybe
right.
breaking down, but...
or being refueled.
Sure, right. So yeah, I don't know. So in a way, I mean, we feel a little bit strange because we are somehow external to this question of citizenship in China, but it's maybe it's a voice from the outside that allows people to kind of go back into the order in a different way. And it is a testament of how open things have become, that a place like ours is allowed to exist, and not even allowed to exist, but like frequently visited by very high-ranking members of the Politburo who, at least in theory, believe in creativity and thus art as the kind of, you know, epicenter of creativity as a way to fuel an ongoing series of economic developments. So it's, you know, and that's the kind of wonderful thing about the epistemological order of like the moment we live in, is that there are all these weird slippages back and forth. Like, for example, in the early 2000s, when Jiang Zemin's theory of the three represents, which was like a justification of party rule for the next 10 years, was enshrined, there was one piece of it that said the party represents the most advanced means of production. And somehow this provided cover for a whole bunch of projects that were about video art, right? Because somehow that was, you know, there's this kind of like free interpretation that happens inside a set of ideological guidelines because there is no absolute truth.
From the architecture perspective, we realised that, you know, the situation was quite hostile on the top of a car park, however warm it is, and it was difficult to get people to come and stay. So we came up with the idea that we could have if we built a cafe on the top, you know, that in itself was a really interesting piece of architecture. And of course it was a massive challenge to get that to happen because of all the engineering stuff. Then people really would come and stay, and that's what happened, you know, from, I think it was in year 3, was it, that Frank's is the name of the cafe, arrives in year 3, and our visitor numbers went literally from, I think, 1,000 people to 30,000 people.
Wow.
And sure, with that comes a whole new set of problems about having, you know, the combination of, is it a bar or is it a sculpture project? But, you know, that's what you have to deal with if you're going to, if you want to bring lots and lots of people. And I think it's that you know, that thing you say, you know, here's the church and here's the steeple, open the doors and here are all the people. Like,
I say
you-
enhanced visitorship.
you know,
That's
you have
how
to,
I refer to
you have
it.
to have a place for people to be and feel welcome.
And also to stay longer. I mean, that is huge.
I mean, and if they've got a slice of cake and a seat, I don't care. They're gonna stay there, and they will, you know, whether they like it or not, they have to go by the things that we put there, and there's different levels of engagement. We just have to accept that. Not everyone can engage in a way that someone super consumed by the art world every single day of their life, reading Art Forum, is not the same, right, as somebody who comes on a Saturday morning with their children. But in the end, there is some unconscious transformative experience. I know that sounds really mystical, but I genuinely believe that's the case.